Sometimes you come across a story that just makes you proud to be an American, especially when it involves someone stepping up when things got tough and getting the job done. This is the story of a man who fought through a storm and helped birth a nation on the other side. Today I'm going to tell you the story of Caesar Rodney. Caesar Rodney was born October 7th, 1728, in what is today Kent County, Delaware, although at the time was still part of Pennsylvania. When Caesar was just 17, his father died, putting the entire plantation and family estate on his shoulders. I don't know about you, but when I was 17, I would have folded under that kind of pressure. Caesar Rodney did. He thrived, not only taking the plantation to new heights, but also attending Latin school at the College of Philadelphia, what is today known as the University of Pennsylvania. In 1755, at the age of 27, he was appointed sheriff of Kent County. You basically had all of the responsibilities that we know today. And then on top of that, you were also responsible for making sure local elections happened, collecting taxes, and overseeing public executions. Rodney didn't just enter public service. He pretty much kicked the door off its hinge. He was elected to the Delaware Assembly, was a justice of the peace, and when the time came, he was there to strap on a militia uniform. He was everywhere that mattered, whether it be the courtroom, a council hall, or a battlefield. If there was a fight brewing, Caesar Rodney was probably already strapping up his boots. In 1765, the British Parliament implemented the Stamp Act. The British unknowingly lit the match that would eventually ignite the powder keg that was the American colonies. The Stamp Act was a way for Parliament to recoup some money from the French and Indian War, figuring that war was really to protect these colonies. Why not have them pay a little bit for their protection? Across the colonies, outrage caught fire. And in Delaware, Caesar Rodney was there to fan the flame. He didn't just oppose the Stamp Act, he actively organized against it. When 9 colonies sent delegates to New York for the Stamp Act Congress, Caesar Rodney made the list. He helped turn what was a roomful of angry men into a coalition with teeth. The message to the crown was clear.
We will not go quietly into the night.
By 1769, Rodney had been named Associate Justice of the Delaware Supreme Court and then Speaker of the Assembly. To the people of Delaware, Rodney was the guy that showed up when others might hesitate, that would be there to represent them in order for their voice to be heard. Now, this is a time when things aren't really as great as they might seem. Yeah, Rodney was putting together an incredible political career, but by the mid-1760s, it was pretty apparent that Rodney had developed a growth on his face. Most experts believe that this was a carcinoma of some kind. This growth resulted in the disfigurement of the left side of his face, particularly his jaw. It became noticeable somewhere in the mid-1760s. He wore a green silk scarf or handkerchief type in order to cover this face, mostly to keep people from turning their heads or even staring at the growth that was becoming ever more prevalent. You'll notice portraits of Caesar only showing the right side of his face. This wasn't so much out of vanity as it was to not have that depicted. I think Rodney was very aware that what was going on was something that might end up in history books one day. And if that was the case, there was a chance that he would end up being remembered. The condition brought with it incredible pain. It wasn't a vague illness that no one could see. It was something that without the scarf, it was clearly noticeable that something was wrong. Combining this with chronic asthma-like symptoms made breathing, eating, speaking everyday challenges. And for a politician, even back then, I can't imagine what struggle that must have been. There was no treatment, no cure, not even real pain medicine in order to make it bearable. But Caesar, he didn't flinch. He faced the world on his terms, with resolve, silk, and grit. In the summer of 1776, while the Continental Congress was meeting in Philadelphia, Caesar had stayed in Dover in order to quell a royalist uprising. Just as he was trying to hold Delaware together, the powder keg erupted. At the end of June, Congress was calling for a vote on independence. It was widely considered that this vote needed to be unanimous. On July 1st, 1776, the first vote came. It failed. Delaware was tied. Thomas McKean was all in. George Reed was staunchly against, believing reconciliation with England was still possible.
Why should I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away?
McKean would send word immediately, sending an express courier at his own expense to Dover. This meant multiple riders and multiple horses passing a message along in relay in order to get it to Rodney by that evening. Thomas knew Caesar would understand the urgency and come right away. Now, here's the part that truly makes Rodney a legend. On the evening of July 1st, 1776, Rodney is at his home on the Byfield Plantation near Dover, Delaware. He's putting together plans to go down to Sussex County and quell this loyalist uprising. Then, sometime during the late evening, a courier shows up at his doorstep with a letter from Thomas McKean telling him to get back to Philadelphia now. Caesar wastes no time. He immediately starts preparing a horse and decides, I'm going to ride to Philadelphia tonight. Basically saying, hey, Revere, hold my beer. He then sets out on a journey that's going to be 80 miles long. That's over 4 times the length of the ride Paul Revere made a little over a year prior. Using typical travel patterns at the time for what would be a regular journey from Dover to Philadelphia, it would have taken Caesar 2 or even 3 days, stopping at inns or taverns to sleep, resting his horse so that way it wouldn't die of exhaustion on the way there. And he did it during what is described in multiple accounts as a violent thunderstorm. Now, keep in mind, the roads are dirt, so this is going to turn them into just a muddy, soupy mess that's going to wear down the horse even faster. Also, bridges aren't exactly common. If there was a bridge, it's probably just a little wooden structure that they have to replace pretty frequently if the creek gets too high and washes it out. And we know that Caesar probably had to cross at least 15 of these, depending on his route that he took from Dover to Philadelphia. Now, we don't know the exact route that he took. That said, we do know that there was a significant postal route in between Philadelphia and Dover that is the most likely candidate. The reason we can safely assume this is because he would have had an opportunity then to have fresh horses ready for him along the route. And we know that based on how often a horse would need to rest in this type of weather on this type of ride, he at least had to change out 4 or 5 times, if not possibly even 8 or more. He's doing this all with what at this time is a hole in the side of his face. The growth has become so severe that it's making his chronic asthma even worse as he's trying to ride this horse through just a wild lightning, dangerous wind, and absolutely torrential rain. But shortly after noon on July 2nd, Rodney would arrive on the front steps of Independence Hall. He had completed a journey that normally would have taken 2 or 3 days in somewhere between 12 and 14 hours during a violent thunderstorm. When he arrives, he gives no speech, asks for no glory. There are no headlines and no crowd. He arrives a sick man on a tired horse, because that is what needed to be done. When it came time for Delaware to vote that afternoon, Rodney stood. He said, "As I believe the voice of my constituents and of all sensible and honest men is in favor of independence, and my own judgment occurs with them, I vote for independence." Or something to that effect. We know that line from a letter written by Thomas McKean some 20 to 30 years later to Rodney's nephew. So the vote for independence passes. John Adams declares that July 2nd will be the day remembered by all. Had he been correct, perhaps we end up celebrating Caesar Rodney a little bit more. But as it stands, the final text wouldn't be approved until July 4th. After the vote, Rodney quietly returned to Delaware, never to capitalize off of his famous midnight ride. He would be widely respected, though, for his efforts, not only on the night of July 1st and morning of July 2nd. John Adams referred to him as the oddest looking man in Congress, but in the same breath praised him for his character and strength. George Washington would praise him for his dedication and his persistence, even in the face of his illness. Rodney's face may have turned heads, but his actions turned history. So you'd think after an 80-mile ride through a thunderstorm, Caesar might see that as a bit of a mic drop moment. Maybe, I don't know, retire to his 800-acre plantation, call it a career? Well, not exactly. In 1778, Caesar would then be elected president of Delaware, a position today we would know more as like a governor. During this time, he restructured the state's militia and kept Delaware contributing to the war effort despite the limited resources of such a small state. Caesar and his brother Thomas actually went into significant personal debt in an effort to keep the war effort alive. Even as his health was worsening throughout this term, he kept showing up every single day, writing letters, organizing troops, just doing whatever needed to be done. In 1781, he declined to run for president of Delaware again, but it wasn't exactly him stepping out of public office. In 1782 and 1783, he would be elected to the state legislature, serving Delaware right to the very end. Caesar Rodney died on or around June 26, 1784. At the age of 55. Caesar Rodney wasn't just a man of politics and war. He had a personal side too, and one that your history books are only maybe going to hint at. We know, for instance, that he proposed at least once, possibly even multiple times, to multiple different women. One that is pretty widely agreed upon is a Miss Molly Vining. Now, Vining turned him down pretty flatly. And it's reported that she then, within a year, had married a preacher and passed away in childbirth. I bring this up because years later, while serving as president of Delaware, Rodney employed her niece, also named Molly Vining. It's believed that this decision was largely influenced by lingering affections that he had for her aunt. That said, despite all of this, he remained a lifelong bachelor. Caesar Rodney isn't brought up very often when we speak of founding fathers, unless you're from Delaware. That said, maybe he should be. Let me know what you think in the comments. After all, he sacrificed a great deal for independence, including his time and his money, and he was willing to sacrifice his life for the cause that he believed in. More importantly, he showed what true patriotism is. Not standing there waving a little flag around on 4th of July, but stepping up in the moment and getting the job done when it mattered most. Rodney's story is one of grit, sacrifice, and a quiet kind of heroism. He obviously didn't write the Declaration or sign it in bold, sweeping letters. He never capitalized on maybe the most incredible story from July 1st, 1776. But without him, independence may not have happened at all. Think Rodney's ride was wild? Wait till you hear about the founder who was willing to fight anyway. Coming up next on my debut series for Torchlight, We the Others. And if you want to see how I made that sign over there, check out the link in the description below. For more history, grit, steel, and the best way to support the channel, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss out on what's next.